Hello, my name is Julie, and today I'm going to be recommending you audiobooks in 7 different genres. I love audiobooks. They really are the reason why I feel like I can keep up my momentum with reading as much as I do. They're about a third of my reading, and as a person with a commute, it is life-saving. It really is. It really feels like I can get some of my time back. I love an audiobook, and I will not listen to anyone who tries to say that audiobooks aren't reading. You're not welcome here, buddy. Believe it or not, consuming a story is consuming a story. I vividly remember the first time I listened to an audiobook because it was of Gemina by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. That was like such a big series at the time, and everyone was saying that the best way to read that book was to read the multimedia book and listen to the highly produced audiobook at the same time. And I was a little spoiled in that experience because, full cast, lots of production going on, and I slowly got myself into reading as much as I do now. I tend to read about 4 audiobooks a month now, on top of my regular reading. I thought a good recommendation for a wide variety of people would be for me to tell you about some books that I love that I consumed on audiobook and enjoyed the audiobook. Some of these are going to be like they have a special part of their production to them. Some of them are just normal, but very good. I'm not going to be mentioning some of my very, very, very old favorites, Sadie and Illuminae, Game of Thrones, 11/22/63, or Woman in the Window, Lock Every Door. Those are like the very first audiobooks that I listened to, love them. And I'm also not going to be talking about some of like the most popular audiobooks right now. Like you can't hit one of these lists without somebody saying Dungeon Crawler Carl, A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, or Radio Silence. I also am avoiding talking about any Audible exclusive titles because I want this to be as accessible as possible. Hopefully, these should be available from your library or whatever audiobook service you use. So I've broken this down into 7 categories, and I am going to give you 4 audiobooks each. So let's get started with the first category, fantasy. The first 2 books that I'm going to talk about are very similar in why I would recommend them to you on audiobook and like when they were released. They were both 2025 releases that were nominated for the Goodreads Choice Awards for fantasy, and both of them have a storytelling aspect of them that is also aware of the fact that there is a reader, which makes the audiobook listening experience all the much better. So the first I'm going to talk about is The Everlasting by Alex E. Harrow. I really questioned my decision of whether this should have been in my best books of 2025. It just missed the list by a hair, and maybe it should have been on there. But this is about our main character, Owen Mallory. He lives in a world that is not our own, but at an era that is inspired by the World Wars. He has been inspired his entire life by the story of Una the Everlasting, who is sort of this like Knight of the Round Table type character. He goes to war in her honor, and then he gets injured, kind of fails, has to go back to academia, tries to write papers about her, and it's just not going anywhere until the Chancellor of War shows up and says, hey, I would love you to write the story of Una the Everlasting for our country. And he magically gets sucked back in time to meet Una, his hero. This book is an account written by Owen and Una, and in that way, it sometimes is aware of the fact that there is a reader and that it'll withhold information from you because it's private between the two of them. Things like that. But it is very aware of the idea that this is being written down and read by someone. And I really appreciated that. This is also dual narrated, and I think it's done very well by both narrators. We have one for Owen and one for Una. And I absolutely fell in love with these two. And this is a fantasy with romance that I really enjoyed because it is more along the lines of fighting for the relationship than trying to get the relationship off the ground. That is a little bit more of what I'm interested in reading. I think if you're a fan of Hadestown, if you're a fan of Laini Taylor, and just general, like, soulmatesy type romance, like I'll love you in every life type romance, I think that you would enjoy this one. It blew me away, and I think it'll blow you away too. And that other book that falls into all those categories is The River Has Roots by Amal El-Mohtar. Again, 2025 Goodreads Choice Awards release. Has an element of it that is aware of you as the reader. This is written as a brand new fairy tale. Our main characters are sisters, and they live on the edge of fairy. It doesn't really go into fairy, it is more like life on the edge of fairy. Our main characters are absolutely devoted to each other. They have the job of having to sing to the trees that are on the edge of fairy to keep the magic going, and there are forces trying to tear them apart. This is a novella, so I don't want to get very much into the plot of it, but it does feel like a fairy tale from olden times where there's a little bit of a bittersweet or disturbing element to it, but not so far that you would call this horror. There's just a little bit of a sadness to the sweetness of the fairy tale. And I think that if you're someone who loves reading stories that are about sisters, this would be one to read. The magic system in this book, which is vaguely defined, is about grammar and linguistics, wordplay. It's really interesting, and a lot of times there are songs that are put in the books that are like rhymes and riddles, and in the audiobook, not only are there sound effects, but those things are actually sung. And I think that was just an extra added element that made this book so successful, and it is talking about like the oral history of storytelling, and I think that that was a really good thing for this book to be doing. Because of that, the audiobook is absolutely perfect for it. Then another book that I read last year that maybe should have made my favorite books of the year list, we have To Shape a Dragon's Breath by Monoquill Black Goose. This is a YA fantasy that is the first in a series. I don't know if we've gotten confirmation that this is a trilogy, but book 2 just came out a month ago. I haven't had a chance to read it yet. I am on the library hold list for the audiobook. I will report back and see if I like it, but I really enjoyed book 1 so much, and I think that the audiobook was a great way for me to consume this series. So our main character is Anakus. She lives in a world that is not our own, but it is inspired by the turn of the century. She is indigenous. She lives on an indigenous set of islands where dragons have abandoned humans there. And the people on the mainland, the English, have all of these dragons and all of the magical power and have conquered her lands and have imperialized them. She ends up finding a dragon egg, hatches it herself, it is bonded to her, and the English come in and say, hey, you need to go to our dragon rider school so you learn how to use your dragon, or else we're going to take it away from you. So she has to go to a school that is run by the people who have colonized her people. And there are a lot of forces that are going against her, even though she is very clearly apt for this position. I read a lot of adult fantasy and everything, but this YA fantasy was a breath of fresh air in the sense that, like, our main character is so purely good. She does everything that she believes is right in this book, and nobody is going to stop her, not the society that people are trying to shoehorn her into. She is going to stand up against hypocrisy and racism and just anything unfair. And I really like that. I loved that she is not being broken by this system. I also loved the magic in this world. It's magically flavored, but it is really just chemistry, and I thought that was so adorable. There was one moment of like magical world building reveal in this book that made me tear up, and I just think if you love books with dragon companions in them, if you're down for reading a YA fantasy series, which I'm not normally, but I still think it's absolutely worth a read, even if you're reading adult. So I loved it. I hope you will too. Then there is the Lightbringer series by Brent Weeks, which is a epic fantasy series that is 5 books long. It's all finished. And I listened to, I think 2 of the 5 books I listened to on audiobook. The rest of them I read physically. This is a fantasy series where the magic system is the light spectrum, and different people can use different wavelengths of light to change things about themselves, to make physical elements in front of you, and all of them will have different properties. And one of our main characters is the Prism, who is kind of like the president meets the Pope. And they are trying to fight against these people who have been overtaken by their powers, while he is also keeping a very volatile secret. It has one of like the plot twists that has blown me away the most. Like, I was not liking the beginning of book 1. The plot twist hit and I was like, never mind, this is incredible. And it completely changed my mind, and it was a series that I ended up finishing and enjoying. If you are into really thought out magic systems that have a lot of intricacies and build throughout a series, this is one that I think you should read, and it's really underrated. I don't hear anybody talking about this series anymore. Now we are on to sci-fi. First up, we have my first 5-star that I read this year, and that is The Compound by Aisling Rahl. This did just win the Goodreads Choice Awards for sci-fi, and I was really surprised. I didn't think people were actually reading this, and I also didn't know that it would be considered sci-fi before I read it. I think this is almost a little bit more of a thriller, but as you'll find out from my recommendations, I love a sci-fi thriller horror so much. The pitch line for this book is Black Mirror meets Love Island. This is a reality TV show where I believe it is 10 men and 10 women have been sent to a compound in the middle of nowhere in the desert. It's a bare bones compound. They are going to have to work together to get challenges to upgrade different things about the compound. Even getting their own food they have to do challenges for. But the catch is that at the end of the night, you have to be in bed with someone of the opposite sex, and if you are not, you will be eliminated. This is like watching a reality TV show that is just leveled up a little bit, that there really seems to be this looming threat of something going on in the background. What do these people really want, and what are they willing to do to get this? And that really pushes the stakes up because it is more intense than any real-life reality show. If you are a person who likes a book that leaves ambiguity, this is for you. If you are someone who wants every single answer, it's not going to be for you, but this had the exact right amount of answers for me because I think the focus of this book is more on what these characters are going to do in this situation. And I think our main character, who is very well suited for this type of game, was really interesting to read about. So absolutely would recommend if you're someone who likes that kind of Black Mirror-y type story. Speaking of sci-fi thriller, we have Recursion by Blake Crouch. I loved this book. Thank you to my friend Rachel for making me read this because we both have read a different Blake Crouch and didn't like it. This is a book that I do not want to tell you a lot about the synopsis, but I listened to it on audiobook and absolutely could not put it down. The vague synopsis that I can give you about this book without giving anything away is that there is a new condition that seems to be sprouting up in different parts of the country where people start having vivid memories of other lives that they did not live. For example, a woman remembers being married to someone else and having children with them, and then she wakes up and she's married to an entirely different guy. And our main character is a policeman who is trying to figure out what is going on with these people. The book very much moves on from that synopsis, and we get more and more intense as it goes on. This is one of the best books I have ever read in terms of building stakes, making every single step feel all the more intense without ever losing the tension for the audience. That is absolutely something I have experienced in thrillery type books. And honestly, some of the things that happen in this book, I think you could say border on horror just in terms of intensity. I think that this book is also metaphorically resonant because it is dealing with that idea of alternate lives and everything. And I just think that this is a book that anybody who loves like a high octane book is going to enjoy. Then we have Iron Widow by Shiren J. Zhao. This is categorized as YA, but I think that is a bit of a misnomer, and I think the author has gone online and said themselves that this is something that they had tried to pitch as adult, and the only publishers that would take the book were YA. And this is the first book in a series that was originally going to be a duology. We haven't gotten news about book 3 yet because we definitely did know at the end of book 2 that there is going to be more. What it's going to be, we don't know yet. This is a sci-fi fantasy that is inspired by China's only female emperor in a almost Pacific Rim type situation. Humanity is fighting off these giant alien mechs, and they have built their own mechs to try to fight them. The thing is that the people to pilot them have to be a young man and a young woman. And almost every single time that those mechs are used, the girl dies. So girls are sent up all the time to be cannon fodder, essentially. And our main character, her sister gets chosen to be one of these female pilots and ends up dying. And so she is going to take it upon herself to get into that pilot seat and get revenge on the boy who killed her sister. And the book moves on from there. I really enjoyed the love story that is in this book, and I also appreciated how much the sequel moves on from the conventions that the first book set up. I really got a lot out of this series, and I loved listening to them on audiobook. Then we have a speculative fiction post-apocalyptic book called The Blue Book of Nebo by Manon Stephen Ross. This is about a young mother and her 2 children growing up in Wales after some sort of apocalypse has happened. They don't know of anybody else around them, and now that they are on their own trying to sustain their own lives, they are sharing a journal, promising not to read each other's sections. and we are following back and forth as the two of them know more than the other person knows that they do, and they aren't telling each other everything. We are seeing as the mother is struggling to adjust to this new life, but the young boy is somehow kind of thriving. This book was super upsetting. I listened to the audiobook in maybe like 2 sittings. It's fairly short. I listened to this while playing Supermarket Simulator, so now I think of the parts that made me tear up every single time I play Supermarket Simulator. But this is a really heart-wrenching one, and one of my favorite post-apocalyptic stories. Should this have been one of my favorite books of 2024? Who's to say? But I absolutely love this one. This is a not very popular book that I think a wide group of people would absolutely adore. And the last sci-fi book I have for you is The One by John Mars. This is a bit of an older one, but it's so good. Definitely recommend the audiobook experience. This is about a genetic test that you can do, like 23andMe or something like that. You send in your DNA and they can find you the person on Earth who is supposed to be your soulmate, who you are genetically disposed to be with. And we follow the story of 5 different matches. So we're flipping back and forth between all these points of views. It almost feels like short stories in that way, but I think that this just really blended those 5 POVs together so well, especially in a pacing way. This is cutting one perspective off at a suspenseful point and then getting to a next perspective, and you're like, I just want to hear what's going to happen in the next one and the next one, and it really helps that pacing. Some of the pairings that we have are someone from the police and a serial killer. The person who created the test gets matched. There's a woman who gets matched with a guy who then immediately died, like before they could even meet. And there is a guy who, him and his fiance, a woman, decided to send it in to prove that they were soulmates to each other, and he gets matched with a man. He thought he was straight. And I know there's one other perspective, and I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. I mentioned Black Mirror for The Compound. This is also like a Black Mirror type episode, but I really love all of the questions that this decides to bring up because it decides to have 5 different plot lines instead of 1. This is just one of those what if books that I love. Now we have our mystery thriller section. First up, I'd like to recommend one of my most recent audiobooks I finished, King of Ashes by S.A. Cosby. So this just won like a ton of audiobook awards. So if you're up on that, you know of this book, but it is new enough that I feel like a lot of people haven't read it yet and would really enjoy it. Think of this as like a big deal gangster action movie. Our main character is Roman, and his family went from poor to middle class / affluent by making a crematorium in their hometown. Not long after making the crematorium, his mother went missing and was never found. Now Roman is a big deal financier in Atlanta, but he gets a call from his sister saying their father has been in a car accident, and Roman puts the pieces together, and it seems like that accident was not so accidental. His younger brother got in with some gangs in the area trying to deal drugs and inadvertently crossed them, and now their father is in the hospital. And so Roman is trying to get his brother safe from these gangsters, and of course things don't exactly go to plan, and they get really, really bloody. If you have not read S.A. Cosby before, his books get very bloody. There is a high kill count, and it is very, very intense. I really enjoyed seeing the development of Roman as a character, or maybe finding out more about him as an audience. And the ending of this book definitely shocked me. There were parts of it that I did see coming in fallout of that I absolutely did not anticipate. I think that this book would make a fantastic movie or miniseries or something. Please, some production company, pick this book up. And you should too. Then I'd like to recommend No Exit by Taylor Adams. This is a bit of a locked room thriller. Our main character is driving in a snowstorm and has to stop because the blizzard is getting too bad. Comes upon a rest stop. There are a couple other people there with her, and she sees when she goes up to her car that one of their cars has a little girl chained up in the back. And so she is going to try to save that little girl without revealing her hand that she is trying to do that. This is another really intense one. This one doesn't have as much of a mystery element to it. It really is a survival type thriller, and I could not put this audiobook down. Really enjoyed it. Highly recommend. I would also like to recommend Ace of Spades by Farida Abake Ayamide. So this is a YA thriller. You'll notice I have like more YA on these lists than maybe I typically read. My library system has a very robust YA collection that doesn't always translate over into adult. So I do read more YA on audiobook than physically. Point is, this is about two Black students that are at the same prep school. And other than being the only two Black kids in their class, they have nothing in common. They don't even know each other that well. But suddenly, they start getting threatening texts from someone who calls themselves Ace of Spades, who is determined to take them down. And the two of them find their way to each other with these weird circumstances that are painting them in bad lights, trying to get them kicked out of school when they are ready to go off to college and do great things. And the two of them have to come together to try to figure out who is doing this to them. And I could not put this book down. I do believe this book is dual narrated, and I did enjoy that. And it definitely took me for a ride. I wouldn't necessarily look up more information about the synopsis if I were you, because I think there's some comparisons that the synopses make that I think gives away some information. But I just thought that this book got like the right amount of intensity and is the type of thriller that works for me because it goes all in toward the end. Really enjoyed it. Now on to horror. I've realized that I don't read that much horror on audiobook, but I do have a handful for you today. First up, we have Vampires of El Norte, which is one of my favorite books of last year. I could not put this audiobook down. You could say that this is also a romance, it's also a historical fiction, but it does tend to get shelved in horror, so I'll leave it that way. Our main characters are Nena and Nestor, and they grow up a bit before the Mexican-American War. They are absolutely in love with each other from a very, very young age, but they know it would be very difficult to be together because her father is the ranchero and his family works on their land, but they're so dedicated to each other. But one day, something terrible happens to Nena, and Nestor believes she is dead and runs away to try to save his own life. Nena somehow survives and believes that Nestor has abandoned her. But years later, when the Mexican-American War has started and white men are trying to invade their land that has been their home forever, Nestor comes back to join the fighting force, and the two of them meet again, and suddenly they realize they've lost all this time together. And it turns out the white men aren't just the white men. There are some strange deaths of exsanguinated bodies going around. That means there's a little bit more to this force than they thought. Another book that I really, really, really want to be made into a movie. I'm just picturing like the sunsets that happen in Sinners. Like, I want that for this. I was obsessed with the two of them. I thought that the historical and horror background for this love story of trying to get these two back together and while they are fighting for their families, I loved that. I was so obsessed with this that I was literally screaming in the car over this audiobook. I could not emphasize to you how obsessed I was with this book. And I can't believe that I put off this book for too long. It's so good. And I also believe that this book is dual narrated as well. Highly recommend. Then we have another sci-fi horror combination, and that is Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes. This is about a ship that is on the very edges of communicable space, and they are the last people who are going to be around to repair the certain satellite before an unmanned craft is going to be the thing doing the maintenance. And they end up hearing a really weird signal out in the middle of nowhere go off the grid of communicable space to be able to get that signal. And it turns out that this essentially Titanic-like spaceship that was filled with like the world's like richest and most famous people like 50 years ago is there. And they come across this shipwreck. They're like, great, we've got these spoils. We're going to be rich. We just have to be able to bring the ship back. So they start investigating the ship. And unfortunately, things are going to go wrong. We see from our main character's point of view after the events of this, and she tells us that she is the only one who made it out alive. This was another recommendation from my friend Rachel. You are killing it this video. This is another audiobook I absolutely could not put down. I was on the edge of my seat at any given time. I think that this is one that had like the right amount of, not quite like jump scares, but really tense moments where I was on the edge of my seat. And I think this did the right amount in terms of both sci-fi and horror. The solution was very very satisfying. I thought the stakes were really high, and I just had a great time overall. Highly, highly recommend. Then we have a paranormal fantasy horror YA series. That is The Diviners by Libba Bray. I've listened to the first and the third book and really, really enjoyed it. This is a completed YA series that is 4 books long, and it is about teenagers in New York City in the 1920s who all develop different magical powers, and they are having to fight different paranormal horrors that are trying to attack New York City. And in the first book, our main character, Evie O'Neill, she has the ability to read an object's history when she touches it. When that little party trick is revealed back home in Ohio, she gets sent to New York to her uncle, who is running this museum for the occult. He gets asked to consult on a strange murder case that happens, and she ends up going with him and saying, hey, I can help you with the investigation because I've got this little power of mine. The biggest selling point I can say for this audiobook is that I could not get into the physical book, and it was not until I listened to the audiobook that this book clicked for me. I tried reading my physical copy, I think 2 or 3 times, just did not get into like all of the New York-y, like 1920s-y slang, and I was just like, I just wasn't feeling it. It wasn't feeling like something I was going to be interested in it. And then I listened to the audiobook a couple years ago. It was actually, I was listening to it when I moved into this apartment. This series is an ensemble piece where we have a wide cast of these teenagers who all have different problems going on in their lives. I think this series is so good at being educational about historical events without being all up in your face, like, look at this lesson I'm teaching you, while being fun and also having really good horror elements, particularly books 1 and 3. Book 1, there is this shadowy figure who is going around killing different people that really felt like almost like a Stephen King type villain that I really enjoyed. Lastly, we have another fantasy horror, which is honestly a little bit of a buzzword for me right now, and that is Someone You Can Build a Nest In by John Wiswell. Our main character, her name is Shisheshin, and she is not human. She is a creature that will consume other beings or objects into her body, and that creates what her body is. If she ate like a deer, she could put like the horns on her head. There is a royal family in the area who are trying to exterminate creatures of her kind. The black sheep of the family is a young woman who is determined to finally prove herself to her family that she is worthy, and she goes out in search of this creature. And so Shisheshin appears as a young woman herself. The royal girl tells her, hey, like, I'm trying to hunt down this monster, and she's like, oh, I'll help you. There is a love story in this book that I really loved, and I think that this book does a very good job of talking about parental abuse and neglect and trying to get over those barriers. And there was just a lot of fun, gross description of Shisheshin, like, creating her body and everything, and violence and things that I think definitely lean into the horror aspect a little bit more than your normal fantasy book. And I thought that the audiobook narration of this was stellar, so absolutely recommend it. As I do with everything on this list, that's why it's a recommendation list. 3 more genres to go. Maybe I've picked too many books, but I have some nonfiction books that I would recommend to you. First up, one of my 2 favorite books of 2024 was How the Word Is Passed by Clint Smith, which is also narrated by him. Clint Smith has gone around to a bunch of different educational sites, mostly around the US, that are all tied to American slavery. And he is investigating those places and seeing how they portray slavery to the people who are coming here to be educated. So he goes to Monticello, he goes to Angola Prison, he goes to Galveston, and he is writing about his experience as a Black man visiting those places, seeing if those places are actively talking about slavery, sort of talking about it a little bit, or actively hiding it when people ask about it. And he writes down all the experiences that he finds of the people that he is talking to. And he writes a lot about the people whose opinions that he disagrees with. He's a lot more graceful than I would be with people that I disagree with, of letting them speak their full opinion. This book is so incredibly well written. Both the writing itself and the audiobook brought the experiences that our author was having to life, so much so that I felt like I was standing right next to him while all this was going down. I really cannot recommend this one enough. One I read and loved last year was Educated by Tara Westover. So this is a very popular book, but I thought the audiobook was a very good way to consume it. So this is about Tara's life growing up in rural Idaho in a Mormon community, but her father was very extremist. Her and her siblings did not have birth certificates for a very long time. They were not allowed to go to the doctor. They did not believe in modern medicine or science or safety. And it is about Tara's life as she is growing up, trying to be independent and trying to find a way for herself, but her family keeps sort of dragging her back with all of their very extreme beliefs. And the thing that ends up getting her out of this is when she gets into college and she finally finds out more about the outside world, outside of her perspective, and that finally sets her free from her parents' abuse. The things that she went through are nearly unbelievable, but I think the amount of fact-checking that she puts into the book saying, oh, my sibling remembers this event a different way. We're not entirely sure exactly when this happens. The amount of doubt that she puts on some things that happened really leads you to believe everything that happens. And I think that that is a good amount of accountability that she puts in there about her own memory. And I really appreciated that. And I'm just like, I hope she has a happy life because she went through a lot. One I just read was Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson. This is a memoir about his work with the Equal Justice Initiative over the course of his career. He is a lawyer. This is starting out in the 1980s and around the time the Equal Justice Initiative was founded. It mostly follows the case of a man named Walter, who was very obviously wrongfully convicted of murder. But it seems like the town wants to pin it on him because he's a black man who did one other thing wrong: sleep with a white woman. And there is so much irrefutable proof that this murder could not possibly have happened, that the witnesses who say he was where he was are blatantly lying, and Walter was still on death row. And Bryan Stevenson was working very hard to get him off of death row. He also inserts a lot of other cases that he worked on that were about people who were disenfranchised, people who were impoverished, people who were disabled, people who were children who were roped into larger crimes, and talking about all of these groups of people who were at a disadvantage in the legal system and how the Equal Justice Initiative has been working to make those people sentences more fair, because a lot of the times, even though there are laws in place, there are not people who are actually enforcing that law. And I think his experience as a lawyer helped him write and craft this really good narrative around all these different cases that he had over the course of his career. Really appreciated this one, and I thought it was narrated well. Lastly, in this category, we have In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. This is a memoir told in a unconventional way. In very short chapters, it is talking about Carmen Maria Machado's abusive queer marriage. So she was married to a woman, and it was a deeply controlling relationship in which our author did not feel like they had a way out. It is told in vignettes that are very creative and stylized to show different aspects of the relationship, different aspects that felt good and why she stayed versus the actual abuse that she suffered. It's so important to be able to portray abuse in queer relationships because, like a lot of different marginalized groups, a lot of the media, in order to make these people seem like they should be accepted by the wider public, they have to be perfect. And this is showing a side of a queer relationship that is not safe, that it is not only men who abuse. And I got so much emotional depth out of this book. It is very highly stylized, so if you get along with it very quickly, I think that it will grow on you, and if you don't, I don't think it will. But this is one that I absolutely recommend very highly if you can handle the subject matter. Then we have my realistic fiction category. These first of these I'm going to talk about is one that I just read pretty recently, and that is Homeseeking by Carissa Chen. This is a historical fiction that is about two kids who grew up together in 1940s Shanghai. Their names are Suchi and Haiwen, and they loved each other from a very young age. And before they could get married, he ended up being sent off to war to fight in the Chinese Civil War. They end up meeting again as grandparents in LA in 2008, and we end up following Suchi's life from when they meet forward, and we spend some time with Highwin, now Howard, as they are grandparents, and then when Suchi sort of stops talking to him, he goes backwards in time until the day he leaves. I think that this book was very well constructed in the balance between the two perspectives and making it clear when things are happening, not being confusing even though we have two timelines that are going in the opposite direction. I really enjoyed the narration of this book. We have a younger female narrator who is talking about their childhood for the most part, and an older male narrator who is talking about their adult lives for the most part. This book talks a lot about the different aspects of the Chinese diaspora, how there are so many different experiences within that. I think Suchi is the absolute shining star of this book. She goes through so much and she changes so much throughout the book. This was a very popular historical fiction last year. I think you should give it a shot. Then I'd like to recommend you A Woman is No Man by Itaf Rum. This is about a Palestinian family. We follow two perspectives. Dea and her mother Isra, who is no longer alive. Isra lived in Palestine and married a Palestinian American man, Adam, and was brought to New York City to live in the apartment that his family has. And we see over the course of her life how this conservative family is stamping out a lot of the hope that she had for her life. But we also flash forward to Dea, her daughter, who is now solely being raised by her grandparents as her parents died in a car accident. She is trying to shirk the role that her grandmother is trying to force upon her. And we also occasionally follow the grandmother. This is such a heartbreaking book, really heartrending. This is one that I have recommended to a good amount of people and have gotten like good responses out of. This book is so real feeling. The characters are so tangible, and I really appreciated the way that this is discussing how trauma passes down through the generations and negatively affects other people. I really appreciated how the grandmother was characterized in this book, and I think a lot of other people will get something out of it as well. Absolutely must read. I'd also like to recommend Don't Cry for Me by Daniel Black. This is a general fiction that is somewhat based on the author's own life. He is a gay black man, and his father, who was ailing, did not approve of him up until the day his father died. Daniel Black decides to write this book, which is letters that is from a dying father to a gay son as he is nearing the end of his life, trying to reconcile and explain to his son his life, hold himself accountable for the first time while also telling his side of the story. And I just thought that this book does such a good job portraying the father character in this book. It shows like all the things that he goes through and then how he passes that pain on to his son. You know, it's called Don't Cry for Me, but I'll tell you, there's a good chance you'll cry. And then one of my favorite books of all time, I ended up listening to on audiobook instead of reading the physical book. And I actually think because of the amount of dialect used in this book, this is definitely something I would recommend. It changed so much for me. I love this book. One of my favorites, the classic The Color Purple by Alice Walker. This is about our main character, Celie, who grows up at the beginning of the 1900s in the American South. She is a black girl who has been, at the very beginning of the book, we see her being assaulted by her father. The children that she has as a result of that are taken away from her. She is married as a very young girl to a much older man, expected to take care of his children, and all the while she is writing letters to God trying to help her through this. And we see Celie as she gets older, as she grows stronger and finds a voice for herself. We follow her through decades of her life, and it is one of the best stories I have ever read in my life. It is a classic for a reason, and it is one that I return to in my mind over and over and over. Celie's letters are written in the dialect that she speaks in. I think there's misspellings and everything in it, so I do actually recommend the audiobook if you're someone who that would like trip you up while you're reading. Or maybe do an immersive read with the audiobook and the physical book. And lastly, we have the romance category. Of course, I have to mention possibly my favorite romance author of all time, Cara Bastone. I would recommend either of her 2 books. By the time this video is out, her 3rd full-length novel will have just been published no matter what. Haven't read it yet because it's not quite out yet, but I will be buying it immediately. I love both Promise Me Sunshine and Ready or Not, but I am going to talk about Ready or Not because I haven't talked about it in a little bit. Our main character is Eve, and she lives in New York City. She is working at an environmental firm, and she is in her 30s. Her life is a little bit stagnant. She ends up out of character having a one-night stand with someone who she is not close with, and ends up deciding that she wants to keep the baby, even though her and the father are not going to be romantically involved. And this means that she needs to get her life together. She needs to figure out her career, her living situation, and all the while her best friend can't really be there for her because she is currently going through a very difficult fertility journey that has gone nowhere. Her best friend's brother, who is also a very, very close friend of Eve's for many years, has just moved back into town, Shep, and he is determined to help her. And this is a romance between Eve and Shep. I was absolutely in love with this book, and I think the audiobook brings the character of Eve to life so much because it brings out her humor that she is constantly using as a defense mechanism. I absolutely love how this narrator, both in this book and in Promise Me Sunshine, portray that angle of the character. I love that this is a story where the conflict does not come from the relationship not working out. This is a very, very healthy, loving relationship between these two that is a slow burn, all my buzzwords right there, as well as Eve's journey of finally figuring out what she wants with her life and learning how to go for it. I could not emphasize to you how much I love this book. It's so good. I feel like I have some more unpopular opinions of other ones, but maybe they're ones you haven't read yet. So a YA romance that I really enjoy, which is saying something. I barely read YA romance when I was a teenager, so having read one as an adult and loving it and making it one of my favorite books of the year is wild. That's I Kiss Shara Wheeler by Casey McQuiston, who this is my favorite Casey McQuiston book, and I don't care what anybody else says. Our main character is Chloe Green. She is a valedictorian candidate at her high school. She is also involved in theater, and she is very determined to just get through high school. But something strange happens in her senior year. A very popular girl named Shara Wheeler very suddenly kissed her and then left her a note and then disappeared. And it turns out that Chloe is not the only person that this happened to. It also happened to the quarterback and a wallflower musician. So the 3 of them are having to work together to try to find out where Shara went. This needs to be adapted too, because I found this book so deeply healing. Like, this healed me in ways I did not know I was broken. I loved how this queer found family comes together. I love all the realizations that these characters have about themselves and trying to find a way to be more truly authentic themselves through finding people that will accept them and can kind of be a little bit more honest with them than they are with themselves. It got to my heart. I think that this is exactly like what a teen movie should be. Also, I'd like to say, shout out to Casey McQuiston for letting the teenagers say fuck. I think the scavenger hunt element gives a really fun pace and plotline to this story, and then it goes into a little bit more of a genuine plotline that really worked for me. So I highly recommend this one, even if you are an adult like me. Next up, I have one of my favorite romances that's also like an unpopular one. This isn't one that I hear a lot of people talking about. I've actually only ever heard of one person I know of reading this book. This is called Make It Sweet by Kristen Callahan. Our main characters are Emma and Lucien, and Emma is an actress who she was on a very much Game of Thrones type show, and her character was unexpectedly to her killed off, and she does not have another job lined up, so she is really upset about this and needs someplace to lick her wounds. So her grandmother tells her about a resort that her her friend has, and she goes there. Turns out this grandmother's friend, I believe, also has a grandson, might be an aunt situation. They're related. This former professional hockey player, Lucien, who has had to cut his career short because he took too many hits to the head. Both of these two people are really upset about their careers that they have been so passionate about, and the two of them meet and connect. Lucien's also into baking, which is a fun element of the book, which is where the sweet part comes from. This is a romance that is more focused on just the two of them than their individual plots than I normally like in a romance, but I thought it worked really well. The chemistry between these two characters was really off the charts, and honestly, I was very, very ill when I read this book, and I could do nothing but lay in bed, and I listened to this almost all the way through, and it was such a comfort. I love these two characters together, and I would like to shout out the fact that this does not have a third act breakup, and in fact has like very healthy relationship stuff going on in it, so would recommend. And the very last book that I have to talk to you about is probably the least popular book in terms of average rating on this list, but I love it, consumed on an audiobook, and I think there's definitely a reason to listen to it on audiobook, and that is The X Talk by Rachel Lynn Solomon. So this is set at a radio station. Our main character, Shay, is so very dedicated to that medium, absolutely loves it, but she has been shafted at work again and again, and is just not getting the attention that she deserves. And this guy who's fairly new to at least their station gets everything. She pitches a show that is the X Talk, so it would be a romance advice show, but it would be from the perspective of two people who used to be together. They need a spot. Her boss says, sure, we'll do your show, except we don't actually have anybody lined up because we need this to go on the air now. So you and the guy who gets everything, Dominic, are going to have to pretend to be exes in order to do this. These were characters that I felt a lot for individually, and then I also like them together. I like the journey that the two of them are going on as being people in their 30s who don't have a lot of personal connections and searching for that. And it's not only romantically, but they're both trying to get more roots in the place where they live. This is a radio thing, so there are excerpts from their episodes in the audiobook if you listen to it. So that's one reason to pick the audiobook over the physical book. That should be my last book unless I'm forgetting anything. Oh, I forgot one. So I'm going to go back in time. I'm going to put that one in the section, and then I'm going to come back here. Okay, I've done the book that I forgot. Those are all the books that I have to recommend to you today. Let me know, what are some of your favorite audiobooks? Because I am always, always, always looking for new audiobook recommendations. I think the next two up on my list are going to be No Matter What by Cara Bastone and The Red Winter by Cameron Sullivan. And if you want to use the same audiobook service that I do, you can use Libro FM. I'm not sponsored by them, but I am an affiliate, and you can find that link down in the description. They are a fantastic service that has a wide variety of audiobooks that are available on their platform. And every single time you purchase an audiobook, part of the profits go to local independent bookstores. You can even choose your independent bookstore to put all of your profits towards. That's what I do. I really like their service, and they make me feel like I'm putting my money where it should be. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to find me anywhere, you can find me at the links in the description. And if you like to keep watching my videos, you can hit subscribe. You'll find out whenever I make a new video every single week. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.